Okay, guys, so today's Market Minute is prefaced by the fact that the inflation numbers came out for January. It's not alarming. We're still where we should be. But what's really interesting is the CPI reached around 1.9%. And this was mostly rather, because of higher gas prices. The reason the numbers are still lower is because of the tax holiday that's offset those numbers. So higher inflation because of higher gas prices, but still lower because of the GST, HST holiday, which means people are paying less to consume the goods that would otherwise be taxed at a higher rate. So that's obviously putting things into an interesting kind of perspective. The next thing you need to keep in mind is that inflation's been at or below the Bank of Canada's target rate of 2% for 6 months in a row now. Okay, this tells you that price stability has been restored and maintained for the most part. So that's reassuring. But the silver lining, and it's not so silver here, it's not so great, is that core inflation measures remain stubborn. And that tells you that there's still a little bit, it's probably the elephant's tail end now, that it is continuing to remain. So with inflation relatively stable at this point, I think the Bank of Canada's next move would really depend on the job loss data. So it's going to depend on what those numbers look like. So that's the first thing that we need to keep in mind. Now, you also kind of have to remember that in the last 3 years, we've had a total of 10 rate increases. And in the last 6 months, we've had a total of 6 rate drops. So we're still kind of acclimating, in my opinion, to what we're experiencing. And people are still a little bit hesitant and reluctant, especially because we continue to see this, news about tariffs and all this stuff. It's been paused. It's been waiting for 30 days. There's a lot of back and forth on this, and it's causing a bit of uncertainty. So with this being in the backdrop, let's now look at what the charts look like. So if you look now, I've added in inflation for the month of January, and you can see overall it's been down, and now we're slightly slipping upwards, but it's still under the 2% target, which is very positive. Now, the next thing we'll do is, just like we do every single week, let's go back and fill in the numbers from the week before and make the necessary adjustments, and then make a couple of predictions in terms of what we're experiencing in the marketplace right now. So I can tell you that the rental market, based on my personal listings and experience, it's starting to do well, but properties have to be positioned well. Vacant properties tend to do a little bit better because you've got you've got no tenants that are theoretically interfering with those showings. That makes it a lot easier to get people through the door. And how you market it. So proper photos, like you can't be doing photos on your iPhone. I would never expect that from anybody in this team, but you shouldn't be doing that, because if you've got competitive units in the market, you're going to end up at the bottom of the barrel in terms of choice, because most people start their search online. So make sure you're priced properly. Make sure your marketing looks good. Your photos are professional grade. And if it's vacant, you've got a little bit of an advantage, because agents for tenants realize that there's going to be no hiccup on occupancy, versus when you're dealing with a property that's potentially tenanted now, that tenant may not leave, and that can throw things into shambles. So with that said, let's look at the numbers and update them here very quickly. So we know each week the data is reported a little bit later. So let's go back and look at the numbers for February the 8th. So this is the 8th week. We've got 1,696 listings. So the number of listings came down by just one, which is great. Okay, so nothing really to amend there. If you look at the number of sales the same week, look at this. We jumped from 362 to 505. So you've got more data being reported. Let's go back one more week and let's look at the first week here. So 1st of February, 17 listings. That hasn't changed. In terms of number of sales, we've got 503, up slightly. So when you go back and tweak these numbers, we're now at 3.08 extrapolated months of inventory. So if we fill in this week now, again, we know these numbers are going to fill in later. We've got 1,398 listings. And in terms of number of sales, as it stands right now, and again, I expect these numbers to fill in 425. Before I comment on that, I want you to kind of appreciate that we've seen an uptick in the number of sales. We've also seen an uptick in the number of listings. And normally when number of listings go up and demand also goes up in the same kind of trend, they're both upwards, they're not going in different directions, prices stabilize. And when I go to the next chart, you'll see that prices are still stable. They're not going anywhere. So anytime supply and demand go in the same direction, you see a flat line. Nothing really changes. When they start going in different directions, you see prices go either up or down. So this is interesting. And again, you can see sales steadily up week over week. And this week is down, but I expect next week will catch up or be a little bit over where we were the week before. So these are things to keep an eye out for. Now, when I go in and I look at these numbers, we're sitting at 3.14 months of inventory. So again, 0 to 4 months of inventory, seller's market, 5 to 6 months of inventory, balance market, 6+ months of inventory, buyer's market, GTA freehold, not including Halton. We're still very much in a seller's market. And I can tell you, properties that are priced lower, that show well and are staged and have proper marketing are flying off the shelves. They're continuing to sell with multiple offers. And that's pretty interesting to note at this time. Now that we've got this done, let's go back and do the same exercise on the condo side. And then I'll come back and I'll review the numbers with you. So looking at the condo side, let's fill in the numbers from the 8th and then the 1st. So if you look at the numbers for the 8th, we're at 1107 listings. So not much of a material shift here. And then in terms of sales, we're 251. So look at that, almost 100 there. Now, if we go back and look at 916 here, so this went up just slightly. And then here we've got 265. That's up by about 30 there as well. So looking at that, we're sitting at 3.92 months of inventory extrapolated, which again tells you that the condo market's starting to swing. We are seeing things start pushing in the right direction. And I think that you'll see more and more of this, especially as more and more landlords become acclimated to what's happening in the market. And same with buyers, like they're seeing opportunities. So for the agents that are educating their clients, like they're pushing their clients to condos now, because as money becomes cheaper, as things start shifting, it's going to impact sales overall. Now, looking at the current week, the 15th here, so 901 listings. And in terms of number of sales, again, we know this is going to go up 180. This puts us at 4.2 months of inventory. So teeters into a balanced market. But again, I think by the end of this month, we'll see a little bit of positivity on this front. Okay, now that we've kind of gone over these numbers, let's look at the weekly numbers. So we know what supply and demand looks like on the freehold GTA, not including Halton. Both supply and demand are on the up. So what does that mean in terms of sale price? You should see that because both supply and demand are going in the same direction, you can see the impact on the actual sale price. It's not doing anything material. It's kind of just flatlined. It's relatively stable. So when you see this go up and down at the same time, nothing happens to pricing and prices remain stable, which we can see on this chart. In terms of average days on market, it's continuing to be a downwards trend. So properties are starting to sell faster than they were the week before. And again, when this week's number of sales pulls in, I'm willing to bet this is going to edge closer to the 19 or 20 range now, because every week we're seeing a trim of about 2 or 3, which is pretty interesting. In terms of the average ask to sell ratio, you can see that we were flatlined up until the end of December. We took a dip in January because of the holiday season, and then we're starting to go upwards again. So most properties that are being listed are going at asking or over asking, which is what is, again, inflating this number slightly. So there are anomalies. I've seen listings for $1 now that sell for $1 million. Data points like that will skew things, but that's not the overall majority of listings. Most people are reasonably priced. So it is interesting to note this. Now, in terms of the condo, looking at the same data weekly for the last 12 months, what we can see on the condo front, so if you look at supply and demand, again, supply is not, it's going up, but it's also kind of looking like a downwards trend weekly. We had an anomaly on the 8th week, right? And in terms of number of sales, they're starting to climb up. So if number of listings are on a downwards trend and sales are on an upwards trend, prices should either be flatlined or starting to look like they're going up. So if you look at the weekly numbers, and again, I know this number is going to come up next week, it looks like the last couple of weeks we've been on an upwards trend, which is coinciding with the data we're seeing on the supply and demand front. In terms of days on market, if we look at the days on market continues to be a downward trend. So now we're sitting closer to the 32 days on market. And again, once the numbers for this week fill in, I'm sure this is going to trim and adjust as well. Looking at the average ask to sell ratio, again, slight. You may not be able to see it on your screen, but it is visibly an upwards trend. And we're getting closer and closer to that 1 mark. So all of these things are quite exciting. When I share this week's data points, I'm going to include a couple of infographics along with the actual charts for you guys. And I've got basic summaries of what to expect. So in terms of overall market analysis, sales prices for GTA freehold, not including Halton, relatively stable between 1.13 and 1.4. Days on market continues to decrease. So we're seeing 23 days on market now. Average asset sell ratio continues to maintain a very healthy level as far as number of transactions are concerned. Bank of Canada rate, we're sitting at 3%. Again, 10 increases in 3 years, followed by 6 rate cuts in 6 months. It's pretty crazy and aggressive, in my opinion. Okay, so that's going to be interesting to see what happens with the job data, because that's really going to tell the Bank of Canada what direction to go in the next rate announcement. We could see some interesting optics there. Rates could stay where they are. They could be dropped a little bit further, but I think that's going to go inside with what we see from the US and all of this tariff nonsense. Now, the backdrop of all of this, you have to also keep in mind that immigration numbers are again, they're lower year over year, right? So the population was trimmed from 6.5% of the population to 5%. And in loose numbers, that translates to about 500,000 less people in 3 years. And most of those people land in the GTA, Toronto, Montreal, like these areas. And so we are going to see an impact in terms of immigration. And we've also seen that, you know, the foreign buyer ban continues to go on until 2027. We've also seen that the city of Toronto has now implemented their own municipal land transfer tax at 10%. So a lot of this is interesting, but you have to really wonder how many of these people are being impacted. Who are these foreign buyers that are prepared to pay 25% non-resident speculation tax and then pay another 10% on Toronto speculation tax and then pay land transfer tax, which is double as well? So I don't think that the government's going to collect, not the government, but the municipal level, the Toronto government is not going to collect the type of taxes that they're expecting. And to me, this is more smoke and mirrors than anything else. Okay. In terms of advice, so advice for buyers, rates will continue to continue to influence demand. So if we see rates continue to go down, we know that historically when the rates have been on the downward trend, we know what this does to prices and demand, right? Look at the interest rates that we've been monitoring, and you can see as soon as money became very cheap, you can see the number of sales just skyrocket. And as soon as money became more expensive, number of sales started going down. And we know based on the AGM that our peak February 2020, like even if you compare Feb 2022 to where numbers are now, we're about 50,000 away. So the people that ate it by buying at this time are about to eclipse and start recovering, which is very exciting. So inventory is growing on the GTA freehold side. We know that, but so are sales. Longer days on market means more negotiating power if you're a buyer. So generally, if you're buying, don't rush. But if you find a home that you're in love with, figure it out, make it happen. Because if you're in love with it, other people will be in love with it as well. And the properties that showcase well, that are properly photographed and are staged, those are the ones that continue to sell at higher prices very quickly. Okay, now in terms of advice for sellers, so looking at things on the seller side, again, it continues to remain very similar in terms of advice. So price realistically. You need to make sure that your price is on point, and if you've got competition in your direct area, that you are the go-to choice. You don't want to be at the bottom of the barrel, because the more number of days on market that you sit and accrue on that market, the more of a negative impact you're going to have on your listing. So over time, if you're priced high but your property's marketed properly, you're not going to see anything positive on that. It's not going to look too good. So you've got to be covered on all fronts from that perspective. Okay. So this is the general advice for today. There are a couple of other things that I want to quickly mention. So today you would have received emails with your draft T4As enclosed in them. That email probably went to your junk. So please check your junk, guys, and respond to that email if you need anything changed. If your address is wrong, SIN number is wrong, something's incorrect on that, please let me know. If I don't hear from you by Friday, we're filing that document with the CRA, and we won't be able to make any changes after that. The second thing is this week we've got training at the actual Scarsdale office. So although this is a hybrid event, if weather permits, I would hope that you guys show up to the actual location. And this is happening at noon. So we're bringing in Fides Mortgages with Vernon and Nellen. And what's really exciting is that they're bringing an Equitable Bank to give us a bit of an outlook and show us some alternative lending solutions, and also touch on their program for reverse mortgages, which are becoming popular. The second thing is we're going to touch on single key. My last 5 lease listings, I have put every single one of the tenants on that through single key, and the amount of data and the amount of work that I don't have to do by using single key has been incredible. Now, I'm not going to personally endorse any system or service or process, but I can tell you my experience has been a pleasant one. So during this session, we'll hear from the folks at Single Key on how to use the service to really enable your landlord clients by not only verifying credit and getting all the consents from the tenant when you're doing it, but also cross-checking CanLI, open room, scrubbing the internet and social media, and giving you a really good picture of who you're actually about to get in bed with if you're a landlord. So if you can attend, I'm looking forward to seeing you at noon on Thursday at the Scarsdale location. Again, it's going to be a hybrid event. Does anybody have any questions or anything to add to that? All right, folks, hope to see you on Thursday, and we'll chat soon. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.